Hi everybody. Hopefully you can see us live on YouTube, and just like to welcome you all back to our first Agile Roundabout of the year. It's good to be back, and we hope to be able to continue to provide you good quality content throughout 2021 and beyond. So for our first event, we're actually looking into the topic of product management, and in particular we're going to be looking at ways to speed up product development. And I hope you'll agree we've got two super speakers to help us navigate this particular topic. So firstly, we'll be hearing from Ed, who's product director at FutureLearn, and then we'll be hearing from Stuart, who's head of product at Not on the High Street. So both speakers would love your participation and interaction. So any questions that you have, please feel free to ask them via the comment section to the right of your screens. And just to note, you'll need to log on via Google to do this. And of course, any social media interaction, please use the hashtag Agile Roundabout. So right, really looking forward to this one. I'll let Ed introduce himself and what he'll be talking about.
Great, thanks very much, Jonathan. So yeah, my name's Ed. I'm the director of product at a company called FutureLearn, which provides online courses for people. And going to talk to you about building products quicker than you ever thought possible, using a couple of examples from my background. So just to give you a little bit sort of a kind of potted history about me, as I mentioned, currently at FutureLearn, been there since the middle of last year. Before that, I was at Depop, the social fashion marketplace, for a couple of years as their director of product. And then also spent time at Rocket Internet launching businesses for them, and started out my product management career about 10 years ago making Facebook games and then mobile games. So the two case studies I'm going to talk about, one is very recent, that's the FutureLearn one, and then one is a little bit older. It's a company called Campsy, which I built at Rocket Internet. So just to take you through each of those so you know sort of what I'm talking about. Rocket Internet, for those of you who don't know, it's a company builder or an accelerator, and Campsy was one of the companies that I built there. So the scope of that was launching an e-commerce site, or like business in its entirety from scratch. There are about 7 people in total, kind of including all the operations people and the kind of founder and so on, when we launched, and about 3 engineers. So I was the product person who was leading that kind of small engineering team. Now, Rocket at that time prided itself on being able to launch a new business in about 100 days. But Campsy we built in about 4 weeks, so in 28 days. I'll talk you through how we did that. Expert tracks. This is something I've been doing at FutureLearn, and has kind of consumed the last 4.5 months or so. So this was a kind of cross-functional project across the entire company, where we wanted to launch a new course type, which included a new business model, and I'll go into a few more of the details about that. This was multiple teams. It was actually 5 product teams. It was about 40 engineers in total, and about 150 people across the business working on expert tracks throughout this period. So that wasn't the entire company. Entire company is about 240 people, but it was kind of a significant headcount everywhere. And that took us 4.5 months to launch expert tracks. The previous kind of course type that was comparable took about 18 months to launch. So in both cases, this was about 4 times faster than kind of benchmark or expected. So I'm going to talk through basically how I did that, and two kind of similar accelerations but at different scales, and actually the things that drove them in both cases were quite similar. So firstly, quick thing about why does speed matter? There's 3 key reasons for me. Firstly, time is money. So time is money in the sense that engineering teams cost a lot of money to run, and unless your product's live, you can't be earning any money. So the faster you launch, the faster you can deliver return on investment, and you can justify the cost of your engineering teams. Secondly is competition. So competition is fierce at the moment, with even established companies moving really quickly. And if you want to get out there and win, then again, you've got to be live. And a lot of businesses will have an advantage by launching first, and especially if there are any kind of network effects involved or brand building opportunities or that sort of thing. So it's another reason to kind of get live sooner rather than later. Thirdly, just so you can learn and iterate on the product. And there's nothing like having a product live to teach you about what's working and what's not working. So getting live with something sort of that's a little bit quick and dirty, a little bit hacky, often gets you to a better overall solution in a similar time frame than sort of spending the extra time pre-launch to tighten things up and doing that with user testing and sort of like non-live feedback. So 5 things that I found kind of were really key to driving this kind of speed, which I'll run through now. First, really tight alignment about what you're trying to build and what you're trying to achieve. Secondly, having a really ambitious timeline to constrain the scope of what you're trying to deliver. Thirdly, really focusing on lead indicators so that you can adapt your plan and get past obstacles as fast as possible. Fourth, being like really clear with your communications, making sure everyone's on the same page and problems get resolved really quickly. And fifth thing is a forward outlook. So making sure that you're focusing on moving forwards rather than dwelling on things that go wrong, because things will go wrong. So cracking on with this. Firstly, tight alignment. The basic rule here, I'd say, before I start onto that, is don't start building until you know exactly what you want to build, because the ambiguity that comes with building something new can take a lot of time. And if people start building things that are not in the right direction, or if you have confusion about what you're building, that is what takes a huge amount of time. So when we built Campsy, the direction we got was basically to go and launch a camping booking site. And that was it. And we, there were a few options there about whether we went down a kind of more Airbnb model, had a kind of more peer-to-peer marketplace type of thing going on, whether we're an aggregator like Kayak, or whether we were doing a sort of a booking platform like booking.com where you could go on and book your campsite right there and then. And we didn't kind of put an engineering team on this until we'd answered that question. So as soon as we decided that Campsy was going to be booking.com for tents, and caravans, then it was really clear what the scope was, and we could delegate a lot more of the decisions and get on with things. So similarly for FutureLearn, we basically had a couple of products already live in the marketplace. So we had a product called Micro-Credentials, which was had a really high purchase rate, but quite low enrollments. And we had a short courses product that was very high enrollments, but quite low purchase rates. And we were looking at basically taking the best of both of those products to create a high purchase rate, high enrollment type of product. So that meant that we were looking for this is kind of like what an expert track looks like now when it's live on site. And a couple of features. So our short courses are always live, unlike our micro-credentials. So micro-credentials are they have kind of live educator involvement. So they have to be run on a cohort basis. So you have a start date, everyone starts at that point. But it also means that if that start date isn't for 3 months, then you can't get on it. Whereas expert tracks, short courses, they're always on. You can always start straight away because the content is asynchronous, and the grading and the automation, the grading of assessments is automated, or it's done by peers. So you're not waiting for an educator or an academic to come along and grade your courses. The other thing that we wanted to iterate on was the business model. So short courses effectively have an optional upgrade, and that's why they see such a low conversion rate, because there's a low incentive for people to convert. Whereas micro-credentials, you have to pay to get on that course. And we wanted to kind of soften the hard paywall of micro-credentials, but have a stronger incentive than short courses. So we had settled on a 7-day free trial for expert tracks, with then an ongoing monthly subscription. And that we felt gave us the best benefit of having, you had to pay to get the content, but it was a lower monthly fee, and you got a free trial to see if it was right for you. So that's like, we kind of agreed on those kind of high level parameters, And by doing that and being really clear on those, that then allowed us to devolve a lot more of the details and decision making there down to the teams. So that's kind of like the critical thing before you do anything else, is just to make sure that everyone's really tightly aligned on what you're building. Second thing is to have a really ambitious timeline, and to use that as a tool to constrain your scope. So again, when we're doing CampC, we started at this kind of black arrow on the left here. So the chart you see, this is a chart we took off Google Trends. It's an index of search traffic for camping related terms. So as you might expect, you see a big kind of spike of traffic over the summer when people go camping, and then it really dies away during the winter when it's too cold and wet for people to go camping. So we were starting here. And the reason that we wanted to move so quickly was we knew if we took the typical 100 days that Rocket took to launch a business, then we'd launch here with this gray arrow in the middle of the traffic pump. And actually, we thought, like, hey, if we don't get this out really quickly, we're going to miss this traffic spike, and we may as well do this next year. So by launching in 28 days, we actually managed to launch here at this second black arrow. And you can see here, we've still got this big bump of traffic to enjoy and kind of test the business model before winter. What that meant was, because we had such an ambitious timeline, we had to be really smart about how we got there. So we took another Rocket portfolio company that was a hotel booking company called Zen Rooms. And you can see here, I've highlighted the checkout here. And that's because that is basically the only part of the site that we changed. We took that site, we turned it green, we changed the content in it. So we filled it up with campsites instead of with hotels. And then we made a couple of tweaks here. So instead of putting in the number of guests and the number of rooms you wanted, we had the number of adults, the number of children, and the type of camping. So that's, tent, caravan, RV type of thing. And that's because that's how campsites do their bookings. But that's all the changes that we made. And by really restricting the scope there, that allowed us to get something out really quickly. For expert tracks, it was a very similar story. So we started looking at this in September, October, and we knew we had this traffic spike in the new year as everyone has like great intentions about bettering themselves and going learning. So really, we really wanted to launch kind of in late December, early January, before this traffic spike. That again meant that we didn't have time to build stuff from scratch. We had to repurpose as much as possible. So we took the discovery journey that we already had. We kind of created the content by taking our short course product and bundling that together and using our existing certificates that we already had in the process. We had to build the payment model because we didn't have a subscription product. But we did that with a third party called ChargeMe. And I talked a little bit about having kind of other learners mark a lot of the assessments and use that as a way of creating this always available experience. And to do that, we had to create this kind of new peer graded assessment module. So that was one of the major things that we built. But all of those we stuck together to create expert tracks, and that allowed us to move much faster. So it's like, to summarize that, like the key message here is like, you don't go and ask your engineers, how long will it take to build this? Or you ask your teams, what are you, how long does it take to build this? You need to ask them, what can you build in X amount of days? So, if you give them a hard constraint and you accept that that's going to be an MVP, limited in scope, limited in functionality, that you can have a conversation along those lines. You need to get engineers comfortable that they are not on the hook for the quality that they deliver. They're on the hook for delivering to a certain time scale that is probably totally unreasonable, but you're just trying to get them to see what they can do in that time frame. And if you pose it to them in that way, you'll generally get some really creative answers. So third thing, focus on lead indicators. Like when you're working to really tight timeframes, then you want to know what's going on, and you want to be clear that if you are seeing any problems, you know about those straight away. So what we used for that was this kind of tracker. This is Expert Tracks, and you can see here that this is a weekly tracker. Every column in here is 1 week. This spreadsheet actually goes down quite a bit. It covers not only the product teams, but also operations, marketing, sales, like every team that was involved in delivering this. And we can plot out all of their progress. And you can see for each week, we're basically tracking their progress on each of these things. So if any team's falling behind on any piece of work, we know within a week, and we can rectify it within a week. And what that means, you can actually see what happened at the top here. I'll kind of hope you can see the detail. You don't need to see the detail, but basically this team, you can see here, it had one stream of work, and they were basically working, kind of classic team, working on the thing they needed to get done. And we realized that working in one stream, they were not going to hit their deadline, which is basically this kind of like double line here, which is Christmas and New Year. So because we could see from the project plan that they weren't going to hit their deadline, we started having a conversation at the kind of middle of October around here about how they could speed up. And as a result, the team split its work into 5 or 6 different work streams, which you can see here. That's why you kind of get this big kind of like split of work, because they were like, wait a sec, we can go faster if we parallelize this work. We gave them, we basically doubled the size of the team with engineers that we found from different teams, and we brought in some contractors. And that then suddenly meant that we could increase the speed of that team. We could like remove it as a bottleneck, and we made the deadline in time. Another tool that was really useful to us is this spreadsheet, which is, again, we use it at FutureLearn. It's almost like another layer deeper on the spreadsheet you just saw. So this is like one team, and what we're actually looking at here is like epic by epic. Again, one column to a week. How much have they delivered in each week? And we can see some things. We track some other things on this. Number of engineering days. How they spend their time. How much of that is going on keeping the lights on or operational load, and kind of you can see some comments around this. And again, the goal here is just to make sure that as a leadership, then we are really, we can see immediately if teams are struggling or if they're falling behind, and we can reach out and we can help them sooner rather than later while we still got time to get things back on track. And just here, actually, I don't know if you can read the numbers, but you can see the number of engineering days. So this is when we started realizing they weren't going to hit their targets. So it went from 24 engineering days per week up to 40. So we nearly doubled the team size. Fourth thing, robust comms. And again, because ambiguity really slows people down, same as lack of alignment, then you need to both be really clear on what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to get there, but also be really good at making sure everyone knows that you're aligned and what the answers are to everything, to questions that come up. At Campsie, this was a small team. So we basically had a daily stand-up for the whole company. And you can see, I don't know if you can see this, but the Scrum Board here, this isn't for one product team, this is for the whole company. So you can see you've got marketing, you've got products, you've got sales and operations on there, basically everything that needs to get done, from incorporating the company to writing the tickets. And again, for product, this is like a summary of the work that's getting done. We had our own boards that had another layer of detail down, but it made sure it was really clear what was going on. And the company kept this like way beyond launch, like up until there were 40 or 50 people doing a whole company stand-up. For FutureLearn, again, this is like an order of magnitude bigger. So it was much more complicated on the comms fronts, and we had to take an approach where we're using lots of different channels to make sure that people were getting the information they needed. So we did cross-functional weekly check-ins using the spreadsheet I just showed you. We had all hands presentations talking people through the strategy and why we were doing what we were doing. We had a dedicated Slack channel where people could ask questions. We had an internal FAQ. That's one of these, which you can see here, just answering questions and keeping a decision log of what we decided and why. We had open product reviews where people could see the details of the individual features and how we were thinking about those. And going into the launch week and deciding about how we do that, we went down to daily emails, basically kind of informing people what was going on, who was doing what, and making sure there's just no room for ambiguity, and kind of like really repeating things and making sure it was super clear what was going on. You can see here, this is actually the meeting. It's a screenshot of the meeting where we asked the teams whether they wanted to launch 2 weeks early. And that sounds like craziness, right? But you can see they're here actually voting for launching early so that they can soft launch before marketing goes live. But that was a decision that they made, and they were happy to make because we were so clear with what was going on and the comms, and because we'd kind of run such a robust process up to that point. So fifth thing, forward outlooks is the final thing I'll talk about. Yeah, when you build something really quickly, then you've got to accept a number of limitations. You're going to have a really limited amount of functionality. You're not going to have an all-singing, all-dancing product when you launch quickly. Secondly, you're probably going to have to do some stuff manually. You're going to have manual workarounds to stuff because of the limited functionality. And you're going to probably rack up a bunch of technical debt. And that's fine, right? If your goal is to launch really quickly for particular reasons, you just need to make sure that everyone's aligned on that and knows that's what's going on and isn't caught out by it. The second thing is, if you move quickly, you will break things. And again, like that's part of the bargain that you're making. So if you want teams to move really quickly, you need to create a sense of psychological safety for them to work in. And that means that when things go wrong, you don't ask, how did this happen? Or whose fault was this? You just always look forwards and say, okay, how can we fix this? What are the next steps? You collaborate with them, you trust them, and you just keep moving forwards. So I think one of the things that surprised me most when I started working at Rocket, Rocket does not have the best reputation for culture, but I was actually super surprised when I joined because things went wrong all the time. And instead of people getting shouted at, everyone was just really supportive and like, okay, fine. So what are we going to do to fix this? And they just moved on. And it was just a huge learning for me that, if you want to move quickly, like actually it doesn't matter all these things going wrong. Like that's just part of the course. What you need to focus on is just moving forwards, fixing them, and keeping going forwards. So that was it. Hopefully kind of finished in good time, but didn't rattle through it too quickly. And happy to answer any questions now.
I thank you very much, Ed. Really informative talk. I think it would be good to start the discussion if we bring Stuart back in. I was just wondering, Stuart, after looking at after watching the talk, if you had anything you'd like to ask Ed about it. You're on mute, by the way, Stuart. Just the saying of 2020 and 2020.
Yeah, you really thought I would have learned by now, so thanks for that. No, Ed, I was just going to say, great talk. Thanks so much. Great to see a couple of examples, in quite different organisations. I guess one of the things that I was wondering from that is, what were the key differences between what was effectively a brand new product in your first example versus, an additional product for an existing portfolio. In your second example, what's the biggest difference between those two?
Yeah, I mean, just the level of complexity at FutureLearn was just across the board and an order of magnitude greater. Just the number of people involved, but because it was an existing product or adding an existing product to the portfolio, we already had partnerships people talking to our partners, and they had expectations about what products would be live or what they might get out of a product. And so being able to tell them what was going on and being really clear about that was another challenge. And something like, for both of these, we got going not knowing what we were going to call this thing when it went live. And that was, when you're launching a new business, that causes you problems because you've got to register the domain and so on. But actually, it's not that difficult to change it right up until launch. With an existing business, when you've got learners and partners kind of relying on you and you're asking partners for content and they're like going, yeah, but what do you want content for? And they're like, this great new product. And they're like, okay, what's it called? And we're like, haven't really decided yet, but we're going to come up with a great name and we'll tell you as soon as we know. So you have some issues like that as well.
Right. Well, we seem to be quite shy on the questions today, which is a little bit surprising. But we may have some more, and we can feed those back to you, Ed, if we get any during the second talk. So we'll move on to Stuart now, who's going to be taking us through his own story on developing products quickly. So I'll let Stuart take over now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jonathan. So yes, thank you everyone for having me. As Jonathan said, my name is Stuart Davis. I'm head of product on Not on the High Street. So if you don't know, Not on the High Street is a two-sided marketplace. Originally in the kind of gifting space, really quite broad though in terms of what we offer. just allowing people to find, special products from artisan and creative partners across the UK. I thought I'd also start with a little bit of an overview of my career journey. I think it's actually relevant to this topic. As you can see, it's included organisations at really different sizes and stages throughout my career. So I started off as a mechanical engineer at MSL Engineering, and I joined Accenture as a business consultant for a few years. After that, I dipped my toe into startup world with working with the funding partnership, who were looking at angel investing for new companies. And then I joined Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and that's where I really transitioned from business-focused consultancy through to product management, and really learned there, all of the different facets and skill sets needed before joining Housetrip, who was a competitor to Airbnb at the time. And again, really delivered or developed that product management skill set. And Housetrip was a startup, and then after that, moving towards Gumtree, which is part of eBay, but had this very great mix of being a startup within a large organization. And then after that, I moved again to Not on the High Street to lead up the product team there. And I think that through all of those different organizations, I've seen a lot of challenges around how you can deliver quickly through the work that we're doing. Some of them are quite consistent and common. Some of them differ quite greatly between organizations of different size. So what I wanted to do tonight was talk through the journey we've been on at Not on the High Street, looking at how we can deliver quicker across the organization. But I guess the first thing I'd ask is, in the context of Not on the High Street, what do we mean by delivering products quickly? And for tonight, I'm going to be saying that it's really the speed at which we can create value and get it in front of our customers. And I'm going to echo Ed's point here that there's a real important link towards competitiveness in the marketplace. A company's ability to deliver that value quickly is essential to keep competitive. And certainly for NOTHs, we are competing against a number of different competitors, both new market entrants, also established business that are diversifying into our area, and hyper successful organizations like Etsy. It's a broad competition, and if we aren't able to accelerate our delivery and get value to customers quicker, it's very hard to even maintain your market share, let alone grow. So we took a holistic view of the full life cycle of work, what it takes to actually deliver impact to our customers. And what we did was we looked at the traditional agile approach of looking at the steps in the process, and evolved it for Not on the High Street and how we worked, and really tried to investigate what throughout this process was slowing us down. How could we move quicker? So importantly here, we're taking account of both the objectives of the company and definitely our customers, the OKRs and the goals that we're working towards, but also the strategies, both in terms of a company strategy and the product strategy, to help in the planning phase, building out a set of opportunities. And that really does feed the rest of the process. So, we saw that delivery speed is affected by all those steps, and the company's ability to deliver on their strategy. So what did we learn from what we found? So we definitely saw that there were complex interactions between teams. This is an established business, but unfortunately there had been a bit of trust that had been lost between teams and leadership. We also found that there was differing direction, and sometimes priorities between different teams were misaligned. And there was also some uncertainty about why we are doing the things that we're doing. And all of those things, there were many other factors as well, but these were really key issues as to why we didn't feel like we were properly optimized to deliver our products to market as quickly as we would like. So, this is a very, this will be very common to everyone here, but we started by looking at the development teams and saying, how can we deliver things quicker? And for years we've had this Spotify model, aiming towards fully autonomous cross-functional product teams, being used as a bit of an ideal, something we should kind of aim for. But as most of us will know, it's really difficult in reality to achieve, that that level of autonomy, that level of empowerment throughout those teams. But we did obviously believe, and we really do believe in the principles that minimizing dependencies and increasing responsibility all around a clear aligned direction are really key to driving velocity, not just within these engineering teams, but throughout the rest of the activities in the business. And there were loads of talks, really amazing talks focused on agile engineering and delivery. So I wanted to focus on some of the learnings we had, outside of the product teams themselves and how we worked with the rest of the business. So the first thing we identified is that dependencies were everywhere. So, looking at the work we were doing, looking at what was slowing us down, we saw that actually, the amount of time that in a relatively complex, well-established business, that teams were dependent on other teams outside of engineering was clearly having an impact on how quickly we could move. So we found examples with marketing, with our merchandising teams, our brand teams. Being a two-sided marketplace, there was a lot of partner management interactions as well. Finance to help support us with financial modeling around some of the products we were bringing to market. Legal is always a big one to make sure we have contracts, etc., in place, and also creative to make sure that we are creating an experience on the site that aligns with our brand as well. So in reality, we know that there are always going to be lots of dependencies. And we wanted to take the learnings from agile practices within product teams and within engineering and think, how can we apply them across the business to help minimize our complexity and make collaboration even easier? So this was the question we asked ourselves. How can we increase our velocity through agile culture and strong interdepartmental collaboration? And I think that if you're on this call, I can assume that we believe that agile is a good way of working generally. But unfortunately, we found not all teams work in this way, or definitely not. And in fact, for many, the mindset of agile is actually quite uncomfortable. It doesn't really gel well with what their normal activities are. So the challenge for us is, how can we help the business get comfortable with agility, and how can we integrate agile and non-agile teams? That was the big challenge we looked at. So looking at the problems we identified earlier, we saw that we didn't really have a foundation of trust to build upon, and trust is vital here. So we started to take some steps to change that situation. The first thing we did is to work on building trust through transparency. So it's a vital requirement to allow the empowerment of product teams. We have to have the trust of the business to understand what we're doing and why. And let those product teams run with it. So we believe that trust is built over time when plans are communicated and updated frequently with a good understanding of the rationale for decision making. We want to be clear on the why behind our plans and show how they link back to company goals. And we also want to really do a good job of managing expectations and delivering our impact against outcomes. So the next step for us was to design an operating rhythm. And, I think this is, Ed gave a great talk about, really exciting ends of things. And sometimes things like operating rhythms, communication plans, and those kinds of things can be, a less exciting thing to work on. But, we saw that in an established business where this trust was needing to be built, it was really vital to make sure that we had really clear and transparent communication throughout the business. This was something that was kind of happening in an ad hoc way. So what we wanted to do was to create a regular touch point between stakeholders, the executive teams, etc., just to make sure that there was an opportunity for early views on what was coming up, questions and feedback, and those all happened in good time, so that the stakeholders felt very engaged in the process and not surprised by any of the decisions and the work that we were doing. And obviously in between that, the PMs and the teams were consistently working with our stakeholders and others throughout the business. We just wanted to add this kind of well-organized layer on top to make sure that nothing was missed and no one was kind of left out of the loop on any of these discussions. So now we had the operating rhythm in place, it was important that we shared and helped build trust. So after this, we worked to bring more consistency and kind of a passive transparency on why and what we're building. So this is and I think Ed showed a good detailed plan there. We had plans in place per team. We didn't have a consistent view across all of the organization about what we're working on. And I think that there were definitely some questions about why we were prioritizing what, and challenges in terms of understanding progress across these kind of matrix teams. So we believe that trust can be built by making the prioritization process clear. We definitely implemented a defined approach. So we're actually using some well-known approaches to prioritize between different opportunities. And then, as I say at the top here, there are many tools for this. And I think, you can agonize about which tool will work best. I think whatever works for your organization is what's important. We actually ended up using Jira. This was a tool that was already being used by the engineering teams. We had a lot of documentation there. And it was just an easy way of integrating everything that, lots of things that already existed, and bringing it all together into a view that we can share and that can be accessed easily by people throughout the business. And at the same time, we were working with the business to try and move us away from, some of the Gantt chart style roadmaps that had been used in the past. I think on a kind of an ongoing quarterly planning cycle, those, can cause engineers and product teams to feel kind of constrained into what they were doing. So we wanted to move to more of a Kanban style roadmap, trying to balance agility with the planability effectively for the business. So the original challenge was how to bring some understanding of when we would see impact at this kind of high level. Obviously, this is before solutions were understood, estimation was done, or anything like that. So we actually ended up using what we'd call like mega sprints, which is a quarterly sprint, to give a really good indication to some of those stakeholders and the leadership team of what we were going to be achieving, without necessarily committing to those kinds of tight timeframes. And I think it's a really interesting difference between the examples that Ed shared in the previous talk. And I think that they both have their benefits, pros and cons, and I think used in different scenarios in different ways can be very powerful to drive that speed of delivery. So this really helped us build the trust in the teams, and also allowed some challenging conversations to happen early. And I think, as this goes back to how this actually helped us move faster, once we had that trust, once we could have those challenging conversations early, it actually allowed us to really explain what we were not doing, and actually really focus our work on the most important things in a really transparent way. So this did a really good job of improving collaboration with our stakeholders. But what was next? So I think the next challenge for us was the alignment of the teams themselves. So, I think this is it's a classic image here, which is, everyone's rowing in the wrong direction. We're not getting anywhere. So being transparent really helped, but we did find that collaboration was difficult in the teams because the goals and the priorities that those teams were operating with were different, and that meant that we really needed to find ways to align them in terms of how they're prioritizing and what goals they're working towards. So what we did was to really start to think about how we can start that collaboration early on, making sure we have a really clear vision and strategy to build common goals and priorities against, and help set the teams up for success. Effectively, if we could make sure that the different teams that had to collaborate were all trying to achieve the same thing within the same kind of time frame, then it would be a lot easier to plan and synchronize up the work that needed to be done. Throughout all of this, we were aware that trying to reduce those dependencies, trying to make the teams more autonomous is a good thing. But I think in the reality of many organizations, they're not quite there yet. So you have to be pragmatic about what you do. And I think product managers play a really important role here. So, for example, identifying things early on with longer lead times. So I don't know, there must be many people here who have found delivery blocked by not having a contract in place, or with marketing content not being ready yet. We wanted to make sure that those things were identified early, so that there was sufficient time to work with those teams to put all that in place. So it was important for everyone to kind of understand what changes would be required here. And I think when setting goals, it has to have the buy-in from everyone and really a conscious kind of top-down effort to support, the setting of goals across those different departments as well. And then moving on, we also looked at the product vision and strategy. So we realized, fairly early on that the strategy that was in place was quite business focused. So effectively, what do we need to do to achieve our business goals? And we really started thinking about how that affected the motivation of the teams, how quickly they would be doing the work. And I think that if you as an engineer or a designer or whoever it may be, can't engage with the strategy, with the vision, it doesn't mean anything to you. I think it clearly will have an impact on the amount of effort, but also the quality of the work that you do. So I'm not going to go into kind of any details about how we built our product strategy or what goes into that. But I think that we will expect to see an improvement in our time to market by having a really clear vision. And we're doing the hard work now to make sure that vision is really well understood across the organization, and the strategy, the strategic work that we need to do to support that vision is really well understood so that all the teams can kind of swarm around that. So there's lots more to talk about in that, but for now I just wanted to share some of the work that goes into building, or that we've done to build an agile company structure. And a summary of what's worked well. So, as I mentioned, clear vision, strategy and objectives, choosing the right thing to do, setting up effective teams and inspiring action throughout the org, creating an agile company culture and mastering collaboration. These are all things that we've worked on to help improve our time to market. And I can leave it there. Jonathan, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Stuart. And just before we get to the questions from the audience, I just thought I'd bring Ed in, just to ask if he had anything he'd like to ask about the presentation and how you've been and developing products within your own organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise, Stuart, super interesting presentation there. Really interesting to see how you do it on the high street. I'm always like a details guy, and I love that chart showing all the different meetings that you had and the kind of the cadence of them. Could you talk through a little bit more detail about how you do quarterly planning? Because I've just always found that a particularly difficult thing to get right, to give the kind of stakeholders the visibility and input that they want, whilst not generating kind of tons of paperwork and bureaucracy for the teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would completely agree with you. It's a difficult thing to do right. And I think the more stakeholders you have, the more people who are dependent on the engineering resources to get things done, the harder it is. I would say that some of the things I was talking about in terms of setting common goals are the kinds of things that help make quarterly planning easier. So where we've had bigger challenges in the past is where we've had completely conflicting desires, and it basically comes down to who shouts loudest. That's the situation that you want to try and avoid. So we want to make sure we've got those common goals in place up front. We've got a good understanding of how all of the different things that we would like to discuss, the things that we as a business think are important, how they relate to those common goals. So we put a lot of effort into understanding the likely impact of different activities. You can't be completely scientific about it, but it's trying to reduce the amount of opinion that's in the room at that point, so that we can be pretty robust in our kind of prioritization of the work that goes on across that. But in terms of logistics, the key thing for me is starting that conversation early, starting to circulate, gather information, and really kind of treating that process as if you would treat a product development exercise. Your internal stakeholders are your customers. You understand the needs. Your real customers' needs as well. Bringing that all together and aligning early against that. By the time you actually come to putting it onto a page and talking to the wider team or the executive team about it, ideally all of those people are already in agreement in terms of what that prioritization is.
I think we've got some questions which are probably applicable to both of you and to get both of your opinions. So Andy asks, since we've moved to remote working, any thoughts on how to keep trust and visibility when working remotely? Well, we'll start off with Stuart first.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, no, I think it's definitely been a challenge, and I've been amazed actually at how well our teams have managed going fully remote. I mean, there are a number of people within my team who have never actually met each other, who've been fully remote, and that's a very different kind of company culture than some of those people that have been working in the company for years have had. So, I think for trust and visibility, for me, it's about little and often, and trying to work on things together. So without micromanaging, I definitely want to make sure that there's enough time that I give to my team to work through problems with them. And I think collaborating on those problems together can really help, make sure that you've got that visibility of what they're doing, but in a helpful and constructive way. Hopefully that answers the question.
And Ed, do you have anything to add, or is it pretty much what Stuart just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say for us, one of the things we've focused on is, we have a series of different meetings. We basically have, different channels, and we've just experimented with using as many channels as possible. So, recording meetings and sending out the recordings if people don't see them, sending out release notes on Slack and by email, all these, changing the format and the cadence of meetings until we feel we've got the balance right. And then, as you would on your own product, then basically going to your users, your stakeholders, and asking them if the process is working for them, and if it's not, then iterating on it. So we've done surveys and just asked people do they feel they have the visibility and the input that they want into the product plans. And that also highlights kind of particular stakeholders who just want to be a bit more involved, and you have to give sort of special attention to.
And we've probably got another question which is quite poignant for both of you to answer. So Dina asks for complex products where product specs are not clear up front, but business still wants engineering team to produce the products quickly. How do we handle this kind of situation? We'll go Ed first on this one.
Yeah, I think here the trick is really to push back until that you do have clarity, and you need to impress on the business that time spent developing when the product specs are not clear is time wasted. So and one way of doing that, I think, is just to be really clear about what the unknowns are, because often I think you get this pressure where stakeholders or the business doesn't understand what the unknowns are. They don't understand why there's ambiguity. So you need to be really clear about what are the things that are unclear and what's blocking you from moving forwards, so that those questions can get answered and then you can move forwards.
Stuart, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ed talked about scope and time in his talk earlier, and I think we're aware that the kind of the scope, quality, and time triangle effectively, and you effectively have to take that choice. So if you want to produce product quickly, one of those things has to either the quality or the scope has to change. And if you're not clear on what the scope is, then I think you're missing a key ingredient of being able to make that kind of decision. So sometimes product specs, you may not have a clear understanding of exactly what it is. So what we've been focusing on is really having a clear idea of, if not exactly what the design and the solution is, but being very clear on what the outcome is. And I think trying to give the teams that autonomy to be agile within that time frame, but still having a clear time frame, still having an outcome that we're trying to drive, but having that responsibility within the team, to achieve that.
Cool. And we'll finish off with just two more questions. So apologies if I've pronounced your name incorrectly here. Zainab says, buy-in of Agile Mindset by business is vital for success. How would you provide this buy-in of mindset for business in your organization?
So I touched on that in my talk a little bit. I think the Agile Mindset, it's not naturally there. I think in a lot of the business that's been around for a while. I think Not on the High Street started off as a very kind of retail and marketing focused business. So what we did with our business teams is really, a combination of training, but also sharing by doing. So, we taught them through the benefits of agile thinking, like how engineering teams work, how product teams work, what good looks like. And it's all very theoretical. But then it's involving them in that journey, making sure that they can actually see the benefits of working in that way, and trying to find a way of doing that, without creating conflict or challenge between the work you're doing with them and the other work that they have to do.
And Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in some ways we've almost got the reverse problem where the requirements from the business or from different functions can change so quickly that you don't build momentum in a particular area, or it can feel like you're not delivering value because you keep changing direction so fast. And the answer is the same though. It's you need to educate those functions on how the product development process works and make them realize that the best results are going to come when you give product teams of goals to hit rather than features to deliver, and you give them time to get to know their domain space and let them build knowledge and momentum.
Okay, and very final question for this evening. Anna asks, how do you set up effective teams if some people are just not hands-on and do not want to collaborate or talk when everything is now online? We'll go Ed first on this one. What would you do here?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think we've just had a discussion with our group PMs and their peers in engineering, design, so engineering managers and so on, about how do they understand how the teams are performing and what's going on there, and that's even more difficult remotely when they can't just drop in on team meetings or kind of have a look through the window to the team room and see what's going on. And I think effectively you've got to be hands-on. You've got to be open. You've got to kind of double down on all the communications that you've got, and that might feel a little overbearing or kind of micromanaging for people. So you really need to focus on being super collaborative, on your best behavior as a leader, so that teams know that they do have that safety to sort of like show you everything that's going on and rely on you as someone who can help them out rather than someone that's going to give them more problems.
And Stuart, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's definitely a difficult problem, as you say. Being remote has made working with teams and keeping that engagement up even more difficult. But I think there's a big difference between somebody who says I don't want to collaborate versus I find it hard to have my voice in remote scenarios. So I would say that if somebody was a non-collaborative person, they probably were before, and I think that's something you would work on in a different way. But in terms of having remote teams, there are lots of tools, there are lots of different approaches, and I think understanding the personality types and the different kinds of people that you have on your teams, and making sure that you find ways to tailor things potentially to them and bring them out of that shell, like giving them an opportunity. Maybe they don't want to talk up in a Zoom call. Is there some kind of offline alternative that they can have? Make sure that their input is given. I think there's lots of different approaches that we just need to understand who's on our teams and what they are comfortable with.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for the talks. Really interesting, and I'm sure our communities are really grateful to hear what you guys have been doing to develop products quickly and the steps you've been putting in place. So yeah, if you want to continue the conversation, these guys are happy to answer any further questions on the Slack comment that my colleague Bess put in the comment sections. Alternatively, if you do have any more questions as well, I'm sure these guys would be happy to answer. And if you were to send them a message on LinkedIn and ask them as well about any of the points they've mentioned in any of these talks. So yeah, we'd like to thank the speakers, Stuart and Ed, and of course you, the audience, for watching this evening. And yeah, look out for the next talk. But from me, from Stuart and from Ed, thank you very much, and hope you all have a good evening. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.